Hi, gang. Welcome back, one and all, to PodStance, the PunkStance Podcast. Long time no listen. How have you all been? How's I know these are all rhetorical questions at this point because nobody can answer them. But how have we all been? I understand it's been quite a lengthy time since I last posted anything onto this page. I took a mild hiatus. Like it's some form of cheese. Took a mild hiatus. I took an extra cheesy hiatus from both the Instagram page and the Spotify for a variety of reasons. My life has gotten so busy recently. I've had a lot of sort of things at home with my family and with my roommate and a couple of other things going on in terms of just general relationships, life. You know what happens. It becomes this conglomerate of life that basically everything sort of piles on each other, and eventually you have this very tall Jenga stack of things that can happen in your life. And then one thing, the moment you flick one of them out or flick it out, it's either going to balance and you'll be fine, or it's going to cascade straight off and you'll not know how to put the pieces back together. Yeah, Jenga-based metaphor aside, I am back. I'm putting a lot more focus into this now. I know I said that at the beginning of this year. I was thinking in my head, like, 2024 is going to be the year where I put all my time into PunkStance, and that didn't happen. So think of me as your lazy best friend, or maybe just lazy person, what you know, acquaintance, as it were. But the plan still stands. We're going to have the same shows. I'm going to try and put out as much content as possible. I don't really know how to do reels yet. I feel like I need to get a friend of mine to help me with that. If anyone has any ideas, please shoot me a message either directly to the Instagram page or send me a BBM pin. What is this, 2013? But yeah, so it's been an interesting time, but I've still been listening to a shit ton of music. So there'll be a number of posts coming up. I've got a few ideas planned in terms of guests for this show and a number of different posts that I'm going to put up. So there's a lot to happen. This next week is very busy for me. I'm recording this on the 3rd of November, and considering the last episode I did came out either in March or April, it's been a fair while. Unless it was May. It might have been May, actually. Oh, no, because there was the slam dunk. I don't know. It's been a while. It's been about 6 months, so I apologise for that if you guys were particularly interested. But we're back. We're here. We're ready to go. And we're going to start off with an episode from Carlin Brown, who was previously on an episode with The New Normal, and there was an upcoming one for Loss of Signal, but I'm going to re-record that at his wish. He's in both bands. Had a thoroughly great chat with him when we were talking about The New Normal and their recent record, to the point where he enjoyed it so much he wanted to do his own episode, which is very, very gratifying to hear. I apologise in advance to Carlin specifically, because we recorded this months and months ago, and then my life kicked in and I had to sort a load of stuff out, and I just never got around to it. So I sincerely apologise. I hope the wait was worth it to listen back to it and share it. But it was a fantastic conversation, one of the best ones I've had with anyone, about anxiety and self-preservation and just sort of classic punk as well. It's a perfect merger of the mental health aura that I like to create with this page, and sort of that awareness of how people can feel and how music can help them. And Carlin was very open about it all. Particularly in recent years, and how music and the bands that he's been in has really helped him. So I appreciate that a lot, and I hope you guys appreciate it as well. Again, thank you very much for sticking around if you do listen to this. I'm hoping to get this up and running again properly, but for now, please enjoy this conversation I had with Carlin Brown and this is a nice return to PodStance, the PunkStance Podcast. So thank you very much, one and all. Thank you, Carlin, as well, and I'll see you on the other side.
Hello.
There he is. I was just admiring your van in your profile picture.
Yeah, I don't have the van anymore, unfortunately.
Oh no, what's happened to it?
I sold it to quite literal gypsies, so it's gone.
They'll make fine use of that, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, man, that was crazy experience actually straight off the bat. They essentially what happened was I got this for the band, and it had one seat in it, and after a while I was like, man, I kind of miss having more than one seat in the van. And like it was just so not practical in terms of getting about, you know what I mean? So I put it up anyway. There was nothing wrong with it. Totally passed MOT, flying colors, blah blah blah. But the guys came and they were like really country for over here, and they were like, "Listen, I'll buy it off you now, but I'll tell you now, it'll cost you it'll take about for £700." And I was like, "I'm not taking 700 for that van. It's worth about £1,000." Anyway, they pulled out £1,000 in cash eventually after much negotiation, and it just in cash and started counting it right there in front of me. And I was like, okay, great, fantastic. It's sold. Good. And then I just looked at the money and went, oh, what if it's counterfeit? So I actually sprinted. There's a bank like 5 minutes down the road from me. So I sprinted down the road and lodged it. And like they put it on my bank balance. And I was like, I don't care if it's counterfeit, man. That's it. It's on my bank balance. It's all that matters.
Wow. I mean, what a story to kick off. I mean, firstly, your impression reminded me of Brad Pitt from, is it Snatch? I think it was.
Ah,
I
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
I haven't seen that film in a while, but I remember him just I only really understood about 20% of what he said in the movie. But I was just
Yeah, he's got
it's
that. That was exactly what they were like. That's a great comparison.
oh brilliant. What a great film as well. I need to watch that again. That was excellent. Well, welcome back. Spoilers for anyone who hasn't heard the recent episode. You were in that, and technically spoilers for the next one that comes out after this one. So you're three for three, my friend. You're sort of
Jesus Christ.
you're nipping in the middle of two episodes that you are also in. So, but I guess what was it that sort of interested you about being on this side of the show rather than the release ramble?
Oh man, like this whole like the albums that saved my life also is a great title. Shall we start with?
Thank you very much.
Is that a playoff like that Smith song?
Well, no, actually, but I'm gonna have to look that up now because it might be
There's
quite
this
similar.
there's a song by the Smiths, probably my favorite Smith song actually called Rubber Ring. And one of the lyrics is don't forget the songs that saved your life. So
I
the
mean,
albums that saved your life is great title.
I mean that's far more interesting than what I actually picked. I think it was based off a compilation album of songs that saved my life that had like Neck Deep covering Torn and Stand Atlantic covering. It was like I don't remember exactly. I'm gonna have to look it up and like while we do it, but it was based off a compilation songs that saved my life. Yeah, volume 1 and 2, and there was Neck Deep did Torn, Movements did Losing My Religion, Stand Atlantic did Your Graduation, and so on and so on. And I listened to through that a number of times, and I just went, oh, what if we expanded that to entire records? And thus here we are. Yours is much more interesting than mine.
That's,
Um,
that's still pretty cool. Also, I think anybody that covers Losing My Religion must have massive balls because
yeah,
that's
tell
just
me
one of
about
those
it.
songs. Like there's like a version Trivium do of it, and it's not bad, but God, it's not good either. And I always thought like it's just one of those songs that only one band could have done, I suppose. But what interested me, going back to the question,
Yeah, God.
was shit. So I always thought about like I've been thinking about doing interviews and stuff for a while for people, and I always thought if I whenever you watch interviews with like people who are like mega famous or musicians, you like everybody's always so focused on like all the music and how did you write the songs and what are you doing next and like what are the tour antics? But no one ever goes like, so what are you listening to? Or like, or what are you doing or what
Ex-
albums influenced you?
exactly my point.
Yeah. So
It's
that
just as interesting to know what people are inspired by than what they're actually making.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about that. Whenever I read interviews from people and they go, "Oh, I'm listening to this," or you should go like, a big guy that I listen to, Stephen Wilson from Porcupine Tree, and does his own solo stuff in 100 other bands. But he is always talking about. He does like a podcast series with somebody else he's in a band with, going through like years of music, and they just like nerd out about albums and stuff. And like, I'll always go and check out the albums that they talk about that I haven't heard before. And sometimes they nerd out about albums that I'm like, how the fuck are you also listening to this? Um, but like, yeah, I always pick up on that. I always love recommendations that way. I find like a few of my favorite ever albums from like people like Tom York from Radiohead talking about a record, and I'm like, that's a fantastic record. He's right, you know.
I mean, I imagine that considering you've been in a few bands as well, and you're currently in, well, I know of two, that's for sure.
Two,
Um,
two only, two only.
two only. Well, yeah, and I've interviewed both of them. What fun! You must have, considering there's quite a disconnect between the bands you play in. One of them's, as we've had from the new normal, quite heavy punk, very sort of authentic punk, almost American style, I think, as you said. And
Uh-huh.
then Loss of Signal is far more sort of bubblegum pop punk kind of vibes. You must
Mhm.
have quite a lot of inspirations from both sides of those, both worlds, as it were.
Weirdly, my relationship with music is very different than the music that I make. It's not that I don't like punk music. I absolutely quite clearly do. But I have I have a weird sort of relationship with music because a lot of the music I listen to is so far removed from what I actually end up making. Like if
Yeah.
somebody turned around to me tomorrow and was like, "Do you want to do like weird psychedelic indie music?" I'd be like, "Yes." I've always wanted to do that. Let's do that right now. Before I was on, I was sitting listening to like Gate Creeper and like Cattle Decapitation and just going, holy shit, I'd love to do something extremely heavy as
Mm.
well. But punk music, like it's more about for me, it's weird because I always talk, I know we're on an album sorry, podcast. I always talk about like records and I'm always like, this record's great, this record's great. But punk rock, I don't really do by the record because
Mm.
a lot of punk rock is like, the singles are really good and then there's like filler tracks and there's other punk rock records which are not like that and they're like gold start to finish. But punk rock plays so good because it's such a scene, I almost treat it like that when I'm listening to it. It's like I have to listen to like a playlist of like a million different punk rock songs and different bands and, you know, kind of listen to it as a big conglomerate glob of like, here's punk rock. Like I have my own sort of like playlist called like Tony Hawk-esque bullshit because that's like maybe like 40 hours long of just punk music. And usually I'll stick it on and like, the way Spotify now does this thing where you can like it'll recommend you songs in your shuffle as opposed to just
Yeah.
shuffling your
Yeah, yeah,
music.
yeah.
That's the only sort of playlist I'll do it for, but I'll always like kind of add that on because like it's usually like on the money, like going, yeah, like I like this. So that's kind of my relationship. But in terms of like influence from punk rock, man, fuck. I love punk rock because it's like it's one of the only genres of music you can do anything with. Do you know what I mean? You can like if you want to write like a 1 minute 30-second song about like drinking beer and eating donuts, you can do that with punk rock. You want to write like a 6 minute song about like genocide and bombs and fuck the government, you can do that with punk rock. And the best part about it is both songs can suck, but people will love them because they're punk rock. It's great.
Yeah, there's a beautiful relationship between people who like punk rock and the punk rock genre itself. Like you can release anything and people go, "Man, that was awesome," or they go, "That was god awful," but I still enjoyed it.
Yeah, and you don't really get that freedom with other genres. Like even that sort of pop punk stuff. Like there are fun songs, like as Blink 182 proved, you can do songs about blowjobs and fuck your mom and all that. But a lot of those songs, like that Blink did, were like heartbreak songs and songs about like heartbreak in different perspectives. Like Stay Together for the Kids, all about divorce and end of marriage and all that. And they have like I Miss You and Adam's song and stuff like all those sort of songs about different perspectives of heartbreak. There's a lot of songs there, and then there's other songs about like chasing girls and stuff like whatever. And then like even like with like metalcore and stuff like that, loads of their music's like fuck you, you won't stop me, or like I'm so defeated and I've been chained down and I'm lost in the undertow. Oh, and you're kind of like you get constricted, whereas punk rock is always so free. You can just kind of do whatever the fuck you want, and everybody's like, cool.
It's that simple, really. Yeah, it's just that you
Yeah.
can. It's so free flowing as well. Like, and I think it's one of the genres that I've seen that is probably the most versatile. Like, you can pretty much plonk punk. That's a hard thing to say. You can pretty
Mhm.
much plonk punk anywhere in the line of genres that a song sounds like, and it will fit in there in some way. Even if it's slightly rebellious, even if a song has one lyric that's slightly rebellious to the government or to whatever, people will suddenly go, "That's a punk song. It's got punk influence. Job done." And I think that's what's so great about it, and that's why it's so accessible to a lot of people, regardless of like where their background is and what they listen to. When I was growing up, my mum used to listen to like Keen, and my dad was a big The Cure fan, and I mean I love The
Mhm.
Cure anyway, but
Yes.
I never thought that I'd get into the modern punk rock scene at all until I played, Burnout 3, Tony Hawk's SSX, all that kind of stuff, and then 2004 became my favorite year for music just because of everything that came out at that time. You can't predict it, but I'm really glad that that's what's happened, really. It's such a
Yeah.
versatile genre.
It's so good. And the other part of the accessibility thing of it, like not even listening, but like playing punk rock, man, like I heard loads of interviews before I ever picked up an instrument of people being like, I didn't really know how to play an instrument. I just like joined a band and it came along. And I was like, bullshit, you motherfucker. Yeah, I was like, no way is that a thing. Do you know what I mean? And mostly it was punk rock people that were saying that. And I was like, no way is that a thing. And then I went and did it. Like I didn't really know how to play the bass before I joined the new normal or helped form it or whatever. Um, no idea, no fucking clue how to play it. Could kind of play like notes and understood like this is kind of what you do, but I still have no sort of classical training. I don't know anything about music theory. Like the odd time someone says like play this in the key of like whatever, and I'm like, okay, counting the frets, and I'm like, I've been doing this a long time to be counting frets here. Especially in Lost the Signal, like Ash and Dario are like they make a lot of self-deprecating jokes about like we're not real musicians. Those two motherfuckers know so much more about playing music than I ever will ever in my life. They are so talented, it's unbelievable. But like whenever we started with the new normal, like I would just kind of like play a bass line. I was always really good at like being like, okay, well this like kind of adds up and we'll do that. and then like somebody else will add to it, and they'll kind of turn my shit bass lines into songs. I guess like that's kind of what'll happen. And like as the years have went on, the bass lines have got better, the songs have got better, which is great. But I never believed that before about how accessible it is. So I think it is like probably the most accessible genre of music you can get into, because nothing stressed me out more in my life than when I went for like guitar lessons, even like as a young adult, because I never really did it as a kid. But when I did it as a young adult, I hated it. You know what I mean? People being like, oh, here's Seven Nation Army and here's like Someone to Love by Jefferson Airplane. And you're like, these are great songs, but like, it just didn't click with me. Whereas like writing shit punk rock songs on the bass guitar, yeah. Yeah, that's for some reason that was the one that did it.
Well, as this is quote unquote albums that saved my life, in that
Yes.
punk rock genre, so to speak, what would you say is one or maybe a few albums that really stand out to you as what got you to want to get in a band or learn guitar, as we've been saying?
In terms of punk rock, I mean, there are so many great records. First of all, we're going to talk about the No FX, because I feel like
You
that's
mentioned
always
them
like,
before than the
yeah,
last
that's
one.
like the jumping off point, I think, for everybody. Like Punk and Drublic, great record, and So Long and Thanks for All the Shoes, two really, really great records where I was kind of like, they're fun punk records, and they've aged semi well. Like they've aged so much better than they should have. A lot of the lyricism from the FX is kind of like, if you take everything seriously that they say, then like it's your own fucking fault and they're not for you.
Mm.
Um, but in terms of like actual more serious bands and stuff like that, like the Distillers. What is the not Choral Fang, but the one that came before it, Sing Sing Death House. I don't know if you know who the Distillers are,
I'm not
but
too sure. I feel like I've heard of them, but I
they
need to clarify
did
my mind.
uh Beat Your Heart Out. It was in Tony Hawk's Underground too. If that's how I heard of them.
Oh,
Um,
that's a throwback.
yeah. She used to be married to the guy from Rancid and the guy from Queens of the Stone Age, and I think both of those ended pretty messily. That song "Fall Back Down" by Rancid is about her, apparently.
Oh wow.
Um, and "Beat Your Heart Out" is about him. So there you go. Fucking and they're two great songs as well. So thank fuck they broke up.
Yeah, they had their 2000 self-titled album, then Sing Sing Death House in 2002, as you said,
Mhm.
then Coral Fang 2003, and then they had like a huge break in between that.
Yeah, and like I never thought I'd see the Distillers. I've always really liked them, and when I got into them, I was like, I really, because she's very angsty, and she's very pissed off all of the time. But I got a chance to see them in Seattle in 2018,
Oh
and it was
wow.
on 9/11, right? Jesus, I have never been in a more drunk crowd in my entire life. In my entire life. And it was me and my ex-girlfriend. But we went to see them, and like it was so rammed in that building. And to start with, like it was sold out, and I couldn't get tickets. And I was like knocking people's doors in like suburbs in Seattle, going, anybody selling Distillers tickets? And they're like, who the fuck are you? This random Irish guy, like who the fuck? I was like, I need these. I eventually got sold them by some model called Gabriella. She's like a plus size model. I can't remember to shout her out anyway. If you're ever listening, hello, Gabriella. But she sold me them anyway, like super last minute, got into the show, and they obviously blew the fucking roof off the place. It was in the Showbox, which is a great iconic venue in Seattle. But there was a point where she obviously acknowledged 9/11 because, of course, and she asked for a minute's silence. Those motherfuckers were quiet. Like it went from like the rowdiest crowd I've ever been in my life to like pure silence. And she dropped like the cable of her guitar on the floor to like mark the end of the silence. And you heard that thing like reverberate. And then she just
Wow.
continued on. Like, and I was like, oh my God. Like she walked when Sharon, like before they came on, she walked past me. I felt like my blood run cold. Like I was in mid conversation with my girlfriend, and I like stopped and looked at her and was like, that's the love of my life, Like there she goes. And she doesn't know I exist, but I know she exists. Um,
What were you doing in Seattle out of interest? Did you go purely for the chance of going to that gig?
no, fuck. I'm half American. My mother was an American,
Oh, well,
and
it's a very proper answer.
yeah, and so I've family over there, and
Yeah.
I kind of went just to be like, I'm gonna meet. Like they came over a few years previously. It was the first time I'd ever known they existed, but I met them. They're like second or third cousins removed, blah blah
Mm.
blah, like really distant family. But I went over to visit them. So I visited some internet friends that I had in New York, and we went to the last ever Warped Tour. Actually, I think it was over
Oh
there. Anyway,
wow. Well,
yeah,
that dates it.
yeah. So it was back then. I mean, it wasn't. Unfortunately, it wasn't a great lineup. There was good bands, but it wasn't too great. And like yeah. Anyway, we went to that. We went to see Radiohead in Philadelphia, and then we flew over to Los Angeles, where my family are mostly from. Stayed in San Francisco, went to Seattle, so did like a whole West Coast sort of tour, and then came back eventually at some point. So it was crazy. Yeah, we've seen loads of bands over there too.
Mm.
But the Distillers are the one, apart from Radiohead, which actually seemed to be Radiohead's last show to date. The Distillers are the one that I always take away going, that was fucking perfect, you know?
Would you say it's like the one of the best, if not the best, live show you've been to? The Distillers
One of
one.
them. One of the best punk rock live shows I've been to. I'll not say like best ever or whatever because like I've been in millions of concerts at this point and festivals and stuff like that over the years, but like that was one of the best punk rock shows I've ever been to in my entire life, and it really solidified. I was like, I need to do this, you
Mm.
know, and I really felt that same sort of energy whenever we did our EP launch, and the crowd was just like the small crowd that we had of like family and friends and like friends of the other bands who we didn't know, so it felt like we had a real audience, you know, and everybody was really into the music, and I would like for a minute I just channeled that sort of energy, and I was like, that this punk rock, man, I love it, you know. I was like,
This
this
is
is
it.
what I
I
wanted.
found it.
Yeah, I was like, oh shit, I could stop tomorrow and I wouldn't care because I had that moment, you know. I think that's so lost on musicians now, but that was really for me was like that was really special. In terms of other like punk bands, man, there's so many punk bands that I love. A big one is AFI, and I know they're now like not
Oh,
a punk band.
I haven't heard that name in a long time.
God, I love that band, man. They have their discography is crazy when you listen to it because they start off as a punk band, then turn into like a hardcore band, and then they do the whole emo thing with like Sing the Sorrow and December Underground and
Mm.
Crash Love. And then they kind of just started doing like weird rock music and kind of like weird like goth rock music. Personally, I'm kind of into all of it. Me and Neil talk about it all the time, and he's like, nah, man, after like like I think it's the All Hallows EP or something like that. He's like, it falls off a cliff for him. And I'm like, that's fine. I kind of like all of it. It's kind of good. AFI, I'm always like they're one of the most versatile bands ever, and they started as a punk rock band. You know.
Yeah, I remember when I haven't listened to a lot of this stuff, but I remember when their EP The Missing Man came out because I
Hmm.
was following that one a few times and songs like I think it was Break Angels and Trash Bat. I remember listening to them and going, I don't know what I'm listening to, but I'm quite enjoying it. It was one of those moments where I could tell that they were in the middle of experimenting. I don't know if you're a bigger fan, that was about the time that they were changing their sound, but that was
I
what
mean,
I gathered from
they've
it.
been like changing their sound since they started. I think like if you go back, even like it's all on Spotify. Thank God. Well, most of it anyway. All their albums are on Spotify anyway. And you go back to like their first like three records, like it's an entirely different band that you're listening to. And then even when you like even sorry, first four or five records, I suppose. And then when you skip forward to like stuff like December, I'm sure you've heard like Miss Murder.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, 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 like that, like all that album is great, and that's such a weird song that's in the middle of it. Like you're kind of like this doesn't fit the rest because that album's such like a concept album, and it sounds almost like they tried to shove like influence of like The Cure and Joy Division and like Bauhaus and stuff into
Mm.
this weird emo record, and like they did a good job, but it's strange. I do like that record. The more times went on since it's came out, the more I've been like that was actually a really cool wee album that people like overlooked, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I guess even the bands you mentioned today, like the Stillers AFI, they're ones that I've heard of, but I've never really delved into nearly as much as I should have. But then again, this is exactly why doing stuff like this is so good because, as you said, recommendations are where you're going to get, you're going to find exactly what you're looking for. And even the smaller bands, like even like the ones that you're in, I imagine that they're having influence on even smaller bands that are just starting up. I feel like it's this continuous cycle of influence, as it were. I mean, do you know a lot of people that are in bands that are
Oh
sort of
yeah.
on a similar level to you?
Yeah, definitely. Spent a lot of time talking to people. Like ever since we kind of went on this journey, the amount of people I have met because of music has like tripled almost. Um, like musicians and stuff like that. And there's a few of them I'm really good friends with. A few of them, there's a few people that I've met. I've been like, I fucking hate you and your music. You know, like, but like, it's been weird because there has been a few bands of like we've gigged with who've been like 18 or something. We recently had a couple of them on a bill, and they were kind of like blowing it. Like whenever I know we talked about before when we got the Drug Church gig, but the amount of people who were there who were also in like weird bands and who were younger and looked at us like it really like made us legit in their eyes. And I'm still like sitting there going like, man, we are like nobody. We lucked our way. Well, maybe not lucked our way into a gig, but we got lucky with the promoter who liked us, and we
Yeah.
had work. We had a lot of groundwork done, so the stars aligned. I will say that. But like those people looked at us like, oh, you must be great. You must be professional. You must be. And I remember thinking about that. I remember thinking that whenever I was going to gigs. Like I remember there was a band who used to be in Belfast called Inelegance, and they opened for Young Guns. I'm going for yes. And I really loved them. They only ever put an EP out and then they disbanded. But I remember thinking that they were so legit at the time. And I kind of felt that same sort of like they were like talking to me about music and talking about like what do you do and how are you recording and how are you affording this? And I'm like, we're all like in our 30s and have jobs, and it's like this is kind of like it's spiraled outside of our practice room, sure, but it's like it's nothing more than that. I think people big music up like the gig inside of it, and the I don't know how to say it, but like people almost big up like they glamorize it and they make it look like it's the biggest thing in the world, and you become almost like another person when you're on the stage. And they forget that like at the end of the day when you're playing a gig, it's just you're just like four people. I always try to communicate that to people when I get off stage. I'm always like, thanks for saying all these nice things, but I'm just some dude, like you could do this too. I always just say to them like, just keep doing what you're doing. If you think your songs suck, just change them, do things, experiment, if argue with each other about the songs, do the right thing and just like put the work in with your music. But other than that, yeah, it is weird whenever younger bands have kind of spoke to us and been like, "Oh, you guys were really great." It was like watching a real band, and it says a lot about the local music scene. I think when people go like, "Oh, it's like watching a real band," you're
Yeah,
like,
you wonder what that
"We,
even means in the first
yeah,
place, don't
like
you?
we're a real band, man. Leave us alone." But yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I get what they mean. They felt like they got their money's worth. That to me is like, you're there to put on a show. If there's seven people there, you might as well give them a fucking show. So.
Yeah. It reminds me of a gig I went to in where I'm based in Kent, or when I was based in Kent. The band Waster did a show in Tunbridge Wells. And they're a decent sized band. They're getting shows in Manchester, Liverpool. I've got the shirt upstairs of their tour from 2 years ago. And we went there, me and my brothers, and we were probably about a third of the entire room. So this band that normally does like 200 and 250,000 monthly listeners or whatever had an audience of about nine, and you could tell that I don't know, hopefully they'll never hear this, but you could tell they really couldn't be asked because
Mhm.
their expectation was so different. Like they cut their set short by about 40 minutes. So they did about 8 songs and then just left and disappeared. And so we paid the full amount to go and see them. And then I was like, because at the time I was trying to promote stuff, I was like, "Oh, can I go and take a picture with them?" And they went, "No, they've left, they've gone." And I don't know, it just felt really insincere
Mhm.
compared to what you were saying about how, even if there's 5, 10, however many people in the room, you want to give them the show that they paid for. And, if they're coming to support you, you may as well support them back. I don't know. I just thought
Yeah.
that's what it reminded me of. I haven't thought about that in years.
I mean, I kind of get where they're coming from. You can be pissed off at a gig. I have been pissed off at many a gig. I can hear Neil laugh audibly in the background, like Carlin's never been pissed off in his life. Like I have been pissed off at a gig before. You do sometimes you have your expectations so high, and then you get there and you're like, this sucks. This wasn't as much fun as I thought it would be, or it's not my expectations. And you kind of almost take it out in the audience, being like, why are you not as great as I wanted you to be? But that goes away after time as well. The more you do it and the more experience you have at it, the more you kind of, the less of a fuck you give, the more comfortable you get. I think a lot of playing music is about ego and like not being an egomaniac. And
Mm.
there's so many people that could learn from that, I think, definitely. Um, there has been a few times I remember when we started, I probably came across like I was like Mr. Big Shot musician, and really I was just excited about the music and excited about the band, but I probably came off all wrong. So now when people ask me about the band, I'm like, yeah, it's all right, man. We're doing like X, Y, and Z and whatever, and then people go, wow, it's really great. And I'm like, yeah, it's cool. And just kind of like try to like downplay it.
So nonchalant.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah, it's
inside I'm
fine.
like jumping up and down, being like, yes, it is,
Yeah,
it's great.
oh, it's it's fucking
Mhm.
cool, man. And then deep down inside, you're just absolutely wailing and celebrating.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
that's just the passion in it. That's just the love for what you do. And I've said this to so many bands like yourselves, and I think a lot of them every single time, at least one of them has said, "We just love doing what we're doing." And I think people forget that not just as band members, but as audiences, is that if you go to see someone and you're going there and you're paying a lot of money to go and see a band that you really like, sometimes you forget that they are just some people that started out playing music and having a laugh, and now they've, found a life out of it. I think it's one of the very few things that I feel like you can have a full cycle of, oh, it's just a bit of a laugh, and then you can suddenly it can become your entire life. I think it's just brilliant. I wish I could do that.
You say, see, I'm telling you the same thing I tell everybody else. Have a go at it,
I may as
pick up a
well.
pick up a shit bass guitar, find some people who are interested, do what Neil did and throw an ad up. I'm telling you, like I remember I went to see Lure in Atlantis years ago.
Oh, what a
Back
band.
when they were like, yeah, I didn't really like most of their later stuff, but back whenever they were doing like Far Q and World Record and all that, like their early sort of stuff. I remember I seen them and Mike Juice was like, if we can do this, anybody can do this. And I was like, no, fuck you, man. Like you guys are great. But like I feel like I almost like feel like, yeah, that was a really true sentence. That was a really like, if we can do this, anybody can do this. I've heard Enter Shikari say that. And I think that sentiment's so true. If you really want to do something, give it a fucking shot. What's the worst that can happen? It doesn't work
Mm.
out. So fuck.
I think that's like it's such a simple message that is lost on a lot of people. Like it's such a cop out statement, but nothing's ever going to get done if you don't do it.
Yeah.
Like you can sit there and marinate and think about it as much as you want, but if you don't actually take the steps to go out and do it, then very obviously it's not going to happen. Like I said for years, I was like, I'm going to do a podcast eventually at some point. I'm sure I'll have a great time, and I didn't do it for like 2.5 years, and then suddenly something in my brain went, look, give it a go, see what happens, and now I'm speaking to a man from Northern Ireland about
Yeah.
music. Like
Hell yeah.
you just have no idea what's going to happen, but
Yeah.
why not give it a go? It's exactly that.
Hell yeah, absolutely. I mean, I used to feel scared about it. Like I used to like measure up when I left school. Like it's like insane. I was about it. Like I always wanted to do this, and I have done it in some capacity to the point where I feel like it doesn't matter what comes next. Like we could do really, really big gigs, and that would be great, and I'd be happy about it and be excited about it. But the actual dream was lived and acknowledged the moment we walked on a stage together, the moment we had a good gig where people were really into us and we felt that appreciation back and forth and that love and whatever. But I used to measure up like, I left school 5 years ago and I haven't done this. What am I doing with my life? Like, where am I going? I used to have this actual like fear about it and actual anxiety. And like when COVID happened and like all of that flushed away, I almost felt like relieved for a minute.
Mm,
I had some experience in doing gigs and bands and stuff, but it wasn't really the same sort of scope as I do now. And I didn't really feel like I'd done it. I kind of felt like, it was maybe happening for me there and now it's gone. And I almost felt like, but nobody's doing it. So it's okay, which is a silly way to think, but I suppose a lot of people felt that relief with a million different things. It was like it was the great equalizer. Like the world came to a fucking standstill for a wee minute there and everybody felt it.
yeah.
Apart from the heroes that worked in shops and our nurses and whatever else. But yeah, I used to measure up against that. So whenever after COVID that we started to get this together, I really felt like I have to do this now because if I don't do this, if I don't throw myself 100% down this fucking hole, I will never do it. I'm so glad I did now, but I used to be so nervous about it and so anxious, being like, I haven't done what I want to do and I might never do it. So now that it's happened, I have so much more peace about myself. It's really weird. It's really, really weird how if you really want something in your head and you think it's unachievable and then you do it, you're like, okay. So I don't really want to do anything else. Like, it's weird. It's weird. I kind of just take each day as it comes. I'm kind of like, I don't want to be in any fucking movies. I don't want to do anything like, I'm not into like art. I'm like, all I wanted to do was play music. And now I got the chance to do it. And I'm like, I'm happy with it. And maybe if it ever goes away, I might go back to that state of being like, oh, I want to do this. Maybe that's what it was. But I don't know. A lot of pieces come from just having done it. I'm sure you
Mm.
feel the same way with your podcast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think your sentiment there is so it's that beautiful mix between what this podcast is about, mental health and music, because it can be a time when, especially in COVID, I felt it, where it's so isolating, both literally and figuratively. Like you feel, especially me, when when it all kicked off, my flatmate and his girlfriend moved in properly together, and then I was also in the house. So I was third wheeling in my own house for like three
Oh,
months,
Jesus
and
Christ.
it was quite odd at the beginning, I won't lie, but in the end we figured it out and it was great and it was a good time. But I remember at the start just thinking, I have no idea what I'm doing. This is, obviously I've never happened. This has never happened before. Nothing of this scale has ever happened like this before. And I just sat and I thought, what am I going to do? And eventually I started making videos and started writing. And as a result, I have a page now. So it just,
Awesome.
you never know where things are going to go. But it's that sentiment you gave of like, I could be upset about it. I could be thinking about what else I want to do, but I wanted to do music, so that's what I'm going to do, and that's
Yeah.
it. It's so like I wish I had that kind of determination, because
Um,
I'm a painfully anxious person, but if I have one thing to focus on, then maybe things will be easier.
I feel like I'm not really an anxious person. Like anybody that knows me is like, you're not an anxious person. Shut up. I can be shy sometimes, but usually I'm quite off the bat. Like I'm just like able to talk to people. I'm decent with people, you know. I don't really have big anxieties unless it's something that's really pressing. And then even then, I'm like, I'm going to do it. I am anxious about it, but I am going to do it. God damn it. But like when things like COVID happened, like when you were in your fucking house, like after like the third or fourth week, it wasn't funny anymore. You know, you were like, shit, what do you do? You know, I wasn't working, I was furloughed. And yeah, it was after a while, it just wasn't fun anymore. I was like hoovering the house every day, watching dust fall off the ceiling, being like, I'm gonna get the Hoover out, motherfucker. You know? um it's just it was weird. It was just a weird time. And during that time I kind of like started to get more and more into like playing video games again, you know, started to do things like ripping out like my PS2 and PS1 games and like playing through those and being
Yes.
like, I'm going to be a kid again because like now every day's Saturday and you're off school, you know, like and whatever else. And I started getting more and more into like different genres of music, and I drank a lot too.
Yeah,
Um,
you and me
yeah,
both.
fuck, man, I think everybody did in fairness, because like what else could you do? And the other thing that I did loads of, like I walked loads. I just like they were like, here, you can go outside and walk for an hour a day. And I was like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna do that. And I did. And I lost an incredible amount of weight over COVID. And so thankfully I've kept it off too. Thank God, man, because I was pushing for a wee while there. And nothing against anybody, obviously, that like people carry weight in different ways. I don't look at other people and go, oh, you're fat. But if I look in the mirror and see myself, I'll be like, you motherfucker, you are fat. You know, like it's your own body dysmorphia. I don't give a fuck what anybody else looks like. Because I seen someone posted a status the other day being like, if you're talking about yourself being fat, sometimes you're projecting your issues into other people who might have the same feelings, and therefore you're making them feel like shit. And I'm like, motherfucker, not everything's about you. Sometimes people are just talking about themselves, you know.
Exactly.
Not everything's
Exactly.
an aimed comment. But I seen a couple of people post that, and it did make me think like maybe I could construct the way I speak about that a bit differently. But for myself at the time, I felt that I was overweight and I was unhappy with my
Yeah.
appearance. And the word you use generally to describe that, you go, I was fat, you know, but it doesn't mean I look at other people and go, oh, look at that fat bastard over there. You know, I just don't, you know, I just don't think like that. But I understand why people would maybe think that you do. But yeah,
Yeah.
anyway, I
Well,
lost a little weight and I was
how
happy about it.
yeah, well, yeah, I was gonna say, how do you feel now about that? Like, what's having transitioned from one point to now? Like, how do you feel from that journey of 2020 to now? It's been like 4 years since it all kicked off. So
Entirely different person, man.
really,
Entirely different person. Yeah, in every respect, mental health, physical health, personality, interest. Like I feel like the transition between who I was then and who I am now is like it's completely different. And I think if you spoke to my fiance about that, she'd be like, "Yeah, you're like I feel it should probably say like I feel like I'm engaged to somebody different than I was when we started actually dating." You know.
wow, that's quite a bold statement that you're such a positively bold statement that you feel so
It's such a good thing.
confidently
It's
different.
such a good thing. I was so man, but before COVID, I was like working in restaurants and stuff. Like I said, it's kind of overweight. I just felt like permanently stressed out, permanently unhappy with everything. And maybe I was okay to be around, like maybe I could have like a laugh and stuff, but like, oh dude, I just wasn't okay. And like I wouldn't talk the same way. I wasn't as good with people. I wouldn't really talk to people the same way about the same things. And I was much more of a people pleaser. Whereas now I can kind of just come in and be comfortable and just like have a fluent conversation with people. Like today with yourself. I could just sit down and talk to you like, we've been friends all our lives because it's like, why not just talk to people as if they are people and just get on
Yeah.
with your life?
Well, exactly. Well, what advice would you give to an anxious man such as myself?
Just be yourself, man. I mean, people are gonna like you and people are gonna hate you no matter what you do. Just be yourself and be comfortable in yourself and like just don't give a fuck whatever people think. Do you know what I mean? You can be conscious of the words you say that might affect other people, but like I said, you're gonna upset people no matter what you do. Just be yourself. Don't give a fuck whatever people think about you and just keep rolling on. Honestly, that as simple as it is and as stupid as it is, just keep rolling on. That's honestly my entire outlook to life. Just be stoic in your approach to things. Just be pragmatic and go, yeah, fuck yeah. You are the main character in your life. Like I know
Mm,
people always like shit on people that say that. It's true. You're the only permanent thing in your life until you die. So you better
yeah.
take care of you and be out for you because like as much as other people are going to come into your life and be happy for you and advocate for you and going to be your friend or your partner or whatever else, you are the only thing that's there. So you might as well treat yourself right and be comfortable and come out as the best version of yourself every day that you can.
So eloquently said. So beautifully said. I'm gonna have to take that and write that. Well, I'm just gonna keep that little soundbite and have it on my phone. Obviously, back to the music conversation. Well, it went sort of more to the mental health side than the music side, which is also fine because I really needed that. But obviously, you've mentioned Neil a few times. You've mentioned your both bands a few times. Do you think, or have you felt that they've had an influence on your music, your sort of regular listening as well, or do you think it's vice versa? You've influenced them.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. We do talk about music quite a lot, and when we decide like covers and stuff, like we'll all throw songs out, and sometimes the songs that like I haven't heard or somebody else hasn't heard, and we'll like do our best to learn it, and it's always interesting because the songs that we do choose to cover usually come out in our own style than just a straight cover. Like there is like. I know Neil said we do haha, a Stiff Little Fingers cover, and it is pretty straight, like because there's no fucking around with that song anyway, as it is. It's already like 2 minutes long. A Suspect Device, but there's a couple of other ones. We do a version of Wolf Like Me by TV on the Radio, and I'd heard the song before, but like maybe once or twice, and I didn't really give it any thought. So then when I actually started to listen to it and like pick up on it and learned it, I was like, shit, this is a really good song. There's been a few like that. We used to do a cover of, I don't know if you've heard it, but Pet Cemetery by the Ramones. And Jesus, it was bad. I think we gigged it once or twice. It was so high for Kathy, unfortunately. Like she has a great voice, but she hates singing high. And yeah, it just wasn't. Although it was sung by the Ramones, ironically, because we played it, I think in a key up from where it was. Yeah, it meant she had to sing it really, really high, and she didn't like it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, definitely with the new normal, I think we all have like a common music taste, so there's probably not much to be learnt. With Lost of Signal, I mean, them two are sort of very rooted in their early sort of pop punk thing, and like me and especially Dario, he really likes that sort of music, and he does like other genres as well, but that's really his main sort of thing that he likes, which is great. Ash, he kind of like we both went to see, not together, but we both went to the same the Smile gig, which is the Radiohead offshoot band that is
Hmm.
seemingly very popular at the minute, which I wasn't expecting him to like, and he's like a couple of other things. He went to Bruce Springsteen there, I'm pretty sure, which I would not have been caught dead at, but sure. Yeah, so yeah, maybe I don't know. That's a weird question, actually. Not a weird question. It's a good question, but yeah, unfortunately, we it doesn't really have any. It doesn't really spark anything for me. I can't really think how that would work with us. Sorry.
Well, no, it's fine. I guess it's just that you're very individualistic in your music and your tastes. I think that's, but then again, that's kind of what makes a band interesting because it means everyone
Hmm.
comes from their own sort of unique spot and brings their own, I guess,
Yeah,
style to it, regardless of what the genre is. Everyone's got their little flash of musical influence,
yeah.
I
I
guess.
I am the worst for that. I think for being like you said, individualistic because I have like I was saying, I listen to a lot of music and I have like a really broad taste in music. And I think whenever I had an iPod back in the day, it was already sitting at like over like 40,000 songs then. And I don't know what it would be at now because like with streaming, you learn so much more and you pick up so much more music. But like whenever I would sit, like if me and my partner have a drink or something down the stairs, we usually just stick on like YouTube and talk shit or like play a couple of games, like card games or something. And she'll go like, "Oh, like stick a song on for me eventually." But like it's always like she wants me to put like a Paramore song on or a Fall Out Boy song on because she doesn't really like when she gets blocked, the last thing she's thinking about really is like what music is on. Whereas I'm like, I'm in the rabbit hole, man. I'm down there and we are listening to the most obscure shit because my brain's like, oh, I've heard this, now I want to hear this, now I want to hear this, now I want to hear this. And suddenly you've listened to like 92 genres of music. And I'm sure at times she has probably wanted to punch me in the face and be like, stop playing this shit music, but it's too polite. you know.
Well, I mean, you mentioned that your music taste outside of punk rock is incredibly varied. I mean, do you have any other specific genres or artists that you go to outside of that?
Okay, this is where I did the
This
research because I was like, this
this is
guy's going
where
to
it
ask
opens
me
up.
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, this guy's going to ask me this question probably or something like that. So when I was like a kid is where it started. Obviously your first sort of like impressions of music are usually from your parents.
Mm,
And the first sort of band that I ever got into kind of on my own merit because they were really popular at the time was the White Stripes. And
yeah.
this was like around the time that like Seven Nation Army came out, but like I still do really like the early stuff. I really like the early stuff then. And like the early White Stripe stuff was this like aggressive garage rock, sort of blues rock music that really wasn't like Seven Nation Army at all. Like they did commercialize their sound, but they had a really raw sound in the beginning. And eventually my dad one day turned around. I think I was like 6 o'clock. I think I was like I was like 6 o'clock. I was like six, and it was like 6 o'clock in the evening or something. So it was probably getting closer to bedtime or whatever. And he was finally like, my dad was a postman and he worked very, very long hours. So like when he came home at night, the thing that he liked to do was have a beer or two and like, listen to music. And it wasn't like, a load of beers. You just have like a couple of beers and listen to music, chill out, fucking fair fox to him, honestly. Um, but he turned around and was like, if you really like the way Jack White plays guitar, you really like, the White Stripes, you might like these guys. And he put on Queen. And
Mm,
now, if you asked him about Queen, he'd be like, Brian May stole everything from Roy Gallagher. Roy Gallagher was the best guitar player to ever live, which I probably echo that sentiment because he's a great guitar player. And Brian May does admit he's an influence and whatever. But like when he showed me Queen, I was like, holy shit. I really, and it wasn't like it was like Bohemian Rhapsody. It was like really early sort of Queen. Like they were like a prog rock band. I,
yeah.
they had like their 70s stuff. I've always really loved their 70s stuff. Their 80s stuff, I like it. It didn't really gel with me as well because it was all like contemporary 80s pop music, and I'm not really a big 80s pop music guy. Like I like the odd songs and like girls want to have fun, let me tell you. But like but their early sort of like their early music, there's an album in particular, which was the first album I'll have to say that I ever really loved. And it's still one of my favorite records ever. And it was one of my mom's favorite records ever when she was alive, called Sheer Heart Attack. And actually, he's my stepbrother, but he's basically my brother because I grew up with him my entire life. And we were in a record shop really recently and he was saying that his fiance really loves the album Sheer Heart Attack by Queen, and I was like, that is fucking surreal to me that anybody else actually likes that album because I never hear people, well, obviously with Queen, like the overarching fucking thing is like Bohemian Rhapsody and like, all those things like Don't Stop Me Now and Another One Bites the Dust. So like nobody cares about this weird like frog record they did beforehand with
Yeah.
like it's like 35 minutes long and all the songs on it are completely different than the last one. And like Killer Queen's on it. I'm sure that like that's probably a big single for them. But anyway, that was the first record that I really loved. And I was really, really like I still stick it on and I'm like, wow. Like Stone Cold Crazy's on it. Everybody probably knows that because Metallica covered it. But I really, really loved that record, and it was such a big influence for me. And it was the first time that I ever heard like prog music, and I really, really love progressive music. I really love music that would like take you into its own wee world for a while. Because I would
Yeah.
kind of listen to like I like most people who own like records and stuff. I kind of like would sit down and listen to a record as if like I'm watching a movie or something. I'll kind of like sit down and digest it and get totally sucked into like what it is. Yeah, that was like the first glimpse of progressive rock I got. Now, like a lot of my favorite artists are like prog artists. I went to see. a band called Riverside last night, who are like Polish. They're kind of in the same sort of vein as like Porcupine Tree and stuff like that. They blew my fucking mind, and they couldn't be further away from like the music that I would be, that I A play and B could ever attempt to play, because he like sings and plays bass, and he was playing some crazy shit in front of me, and I was like, okay, fine, dude, do whatever you want, But they were so good. I love prog. It just takes you like into an entirely different world. But like, I think like with the whole punk rock thing, like I got into like emo music first, before I was ever really, really into like punk rock music, like Fall Out Boy and MCR and stuff. And this was like, it was like you were saying, like 2004, 2005. This was when those bands were like kind of just starting, but really, really where they launched from, where they got really big.
Yeah,
And like
exactly.
it was crazy back then, because like I really remember, ironically, when people talk about like the 7/7 bombings, I always really remember it being on TV. And like it was back when you had like small TVs in your kitchen. I
Mm.
remember being on, I was at a friend's house, and it was like showing the news coverage from it. And like obviously I was like 10, so I was kind of like, I don't understand, 9 or 10 or something like that. Like I obviously didn't understand. I understand something horrible had happened, but I didn't know fucking what. Couldn't understand the gravity of it. But I remember going into like his living room after that, and like Krang was on, and like Sugar We're Going Down came on, Tears Don't Fall was next. Like, and it was before like the Black Parade, so like I'm Not Okay and stuff. And I remember when the Black Parade came out, and like I still laugh about this because my dad said it to me the other day, but like it was like I bought the single of it back when you could buy like singles. Jesus Christ.
What a
And
time.
yeah, before it was like 7 inches, it was like you could go into HMV and buy a single for 2 quid. And fucking I stuck Welcome to the Black Parade on. I wore that song out, man. I must have listened to it 100 times a day. And one day my dad came upstairs and was like, "You need to turn that the fuck off before I throw it out the window, dude." Like to like 10-year-old me being like, "What is this song?" I suppose that for me, that was like, our generation's Bohemian Rhapsody. I think there has
Mm.
never been another song like it. In that respect, there's never been a song that's so like, it is like it's like a big opera. Obviously, Bohemian Rhapsody is like, fucking it is what it is. But Welcome to the Black Parade is that genre, is like Bohemian Rhapsody. The Black Parade is like The Wall by Pink Floyd, in my opinion, of like
Yeah.
emo music. It is like the definitive album of like, this is what our generation is about. This is what, and look how it changed the landscape of music in that respect. The amount of bands that like are completely influenced by MCR, and the look of everybody. Like I had a friend who was wearing that like MCR jacket. God rest his soul, because he's no longer with us, unfortunately. But he wore that MCR jacket, and it wasn't even then. He was wearing it like 10 years later, all the fucking time, and he loved it. And I just thought about, like, I was like, they were his favorite band ever. And actually, whenever they did their reunion tour, like Jared Way had a big flag of like the names of people who were unfortunately no longer with us, but his name was on the flag. Jesus, I cried my fucking lamps out when I seen it, to be fair. But yeah,
Wow.
so yeah, weird. I don't know how I got there from other genres of music, but yeah, I was thinking about that whenever you were talking about it. I was like, what were the albums that really got me into music and kind of sent it around?
I wondered if any other MCR albums were sort of. I remember when Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge came out, and that had well, that had I'm Not Okay on it, and Helena, I think it was. Um,
Yeah.
that was a great album as well. Like, were there any others in that kind of scene that really kicked things off, or was it mainly the MCR Black Parade thing that you remember of that time?
The Black Parade was the first one. No, it wasn't the first one I had, because I had Free Cheers when it came out, or close to when it came out anyway. Um, and I love fuck, I wore that album. I would still say that's probably my favorite MCR album. I really love the first one. Like I Brought You Bullets is like a fucking great sort of post-hardcore album that like
Mm.
people really overlook when they talk about post-hardcore records. But yeah, I love that album. I remember like From Under the Cork Tree by Fall Out Boy is one of those albums. I even love, just whenever you say it, it gives this warmness to your heart, like From Under the Cork Tree. I'm just like, God, I wore that out, and Infinity on High as well. But like kind of barring like the kind of mainstream artists in that respect, it's there's so many people I love back then, like Silverstein,
In their
AFI that
early
we talked
days.
about. Yeah, in their early days, man, they were a different fucking animal. Like, we talked about AFI, but like Linkin Park were a big band for
Yeah.
me, and I was one of the few fortunate people in the planet, I suppose, that went to the download where they did Hybrid Theory in full. And
Oh wow.
Jesus, that was crazy. And what was crazy about it was like obviously Hybrid Theory in full was great, but they got through it in like half an hour because the album's only like 35 minutes long as it is, and if live speed and whatever else. But the set that they played afterwards, because they played for like another hour and a half of all their own stuff, I really came away from that being like Linkin Park were deservedly one of the best bands ever on the planet. That is definitely up there in one of my top 5 gigs ever. I would say Linkin Park. I'm so glad I got to see them. I'm only devastated that I didn't get to see them again. But it was weird when you talk about like albums from that era of music, because that era of music, like it was just that was the sort of like post nu metal thing, wasn't it? Like, it was like Slipknot and stuff. Like it was still happening, like Duality and stuff was coming out, but the big boom had already kind of happened there, you know, and like
Mm.
a lot of things that were still popular then was like, like Korn and like Freaking Elation stuff. And like Korn on their own, I could talk about all day. Like I loved that band when I was younger. They were the first band that ever like they scared the shit out of me when I was a kid. Like you should not give it 12. See, I don't know if you ever heard their debut album.
I haven't listened to a lot of Korn. My roommate really likes Korn, but I haven't really
Oh
explored
man,
them that much.
their debut record. There's a song like the whole thing is that's a dark record to begin with. It like as a debut record, it is one of the best debuts of all time by anybody in any genre, and I'll fucking die on the hill. But like, there's a song in the end of it because it called Daddy, and it's essentially about Jonathan Davis being sexually assaulted by his neighbor and his parents not believing him. And the song is dark. The lyrical content is dark, but at the end of the song, like it's just him screaming and crying and actually having like probably a meth induced angst and panic attack in the booth, because there's a lot of drug use going on with Corn. Then like one of the songs
Jesus.
is called Helmet in the Bush, and it means exactly what you think it does because of like
Mm.
the amount of speed they were taking. Like it's just fucking horrible. But what you're hearing there is just like actual trauma going on, like real life. This guy is exercising his demons in the only way he knows how. And it's scary to listen to. Like, you should not give that record to a 12-year-old. If I have a kid, they are not listening to that record at 12 years old because I used to listen to it in the dark with like my headphones on and like go and listen to it after this. I swear to God, man, it is traumatizing. You do come away from that going, fuck, man. And there was a couple of Korn songs that were like that, were in their early days that were so dark, and it's just him crying and screaming in the vocal booth. But there was a big record they did called Follow the Leader, and that was their like the one with like Freaking Elation, Got the Life and all on it, and like that was the big one that like everybody loved. And like that's a great record. That was a big record for me because I was kind of like, oh, you can be a metal band but still be really funky. And it led me to
Mm.
bands like, like Faith No More, that song Epic and stuff like that. That was, I can see where the influence really came from, for Korn from them, I should say. I don't know, man. It's a good question because for me, there's so many things that like there's so many albums that really make me think about life and about where I was in life. Like when I get drunk and nostalgic, like I'll always go back to like emo records. But when I think about like things, because I like I was saying to you earlier on, I feel like I'm an entirely different person now than I was even a few years ago. When I start to get nostalgic for like a few years ago, it's because I do feel like a different person, and I almost have had a like the past sort of year or so, I've almost accepted all the things that I didn't like about my life then and have kind of moved on from them, or I've been trying to move on from them. So there's a lot of songs that I listen to then that I still really like, but if I put them on, I go, fuck, man. I it really does bring me into this whole thing. Like there's an album by a guy called, there's two albums actually by a guy called Current Joys, who is also in Surf Curse, if you've heard of them.
I don't know them actually. I might have to look
They're
them up.
they're pretty good. They're really big in America actually, Surf Curse. But their lead singer has a side project that's also really big at the minute. The last two albums, he's kind of done like the Lil Peep thing where it's like emo rap and screamo and like entirely far away from like the music that I'm talking about that he did, where it's like lo-fi indie and it's so good. Like the lyrics, it's dark music. It like you'll have heard it on TikTok. Some of the songs have been like used on like as sounds and stuff and like slowed down. Surf Curse wrote that song Freaks. The ones like dun 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 dun.
Oh yeah.
I
Oh
am just a freak. Yeah, they wrote that.
That's by
Um,
far the most popular song from what I can tell.
yeah, that is like the song that
By,
that blew them out of the
by a
water. Like,
huge margin.
but he has a couple of albums, one called A Different Age and one called Voyager. And I used to listen to them a few years ago whenever I was going through some shit. And like when I put them on now, I'm like, fuck, man, those albums were so dark, but they really encapsulated how I felt. And I used to listen to them all the time. I don't like it, probably I shouldn't have been listening to them. Probably I would have been a lot happier if I wasn't actually just sitting in it. But sometimes you have to sit in things and stew
That's
and stew and stew until
that's
you're
what
done.
happens though, isn't it? You find a
Yeah.
record that you really sit with, and it sort of acts as that crutch at that moment, and it sort of becomes this almost oral pathetic fallacy. Don't know what that means, but it makes
Yeah,
sense in
yeah.
my head. Like it sort of encapsulates your feeling. I've had so many times like that, and you just listen to one record and suddenly you feel so much better.
Yeah, it's weird. It's the power of music and all that. Like I used to when I was like it's really weird because my music taste really changed when I was like in high school and stuff like that. I was really into like just like metal and screamo and stuff like that. And like I was into loads of other things, but those were the main genres of music I listened to. And then when I started to like get a wee bit older, I started to go into like bands like La Dispute and Being as an Ocean and all that sort of like melodic hardcore stuff. A lot
Mm,
of it's like kind of spoken word. And like though like La Dispute are on fucking matched in terms of lyrical content. I don't care what anybody says. Like their albums are like you get sucked in and you're in a different world for a wee while. They're doing a 10-year anniversary of their album Rooms of the House. Oh my God, when I tell you, like, Rooms of the House saved my life in like 2015. I swear to God, it was like this album, like, I felt like it was written for me. Obviously it wasn't, but like, I really felt like, oh my God, this guy gets how I feel. And a lot of the situations, like, there are some songs on it, obviously, because some of the songs are about like the album is essentially a concept album about a couple that lost a child. I thankfully have not, and hopefully never will be in that sort of position, but their relationship fell apart because of it. And I was going through like a breakup then with somebody that I was doing long distance with, and I never seen her again. And I almost had the more in the relationship as if she died, you
mm.
know, because I didn't see her again. And like the only time I ever like see or think of her is if like I scroll on Facebook and like the odd time she comes up and I'm like, oh, fuck yeah. But it's really weird that at one point, like, that was she was the biggest thing in my life. It's weird. But I used to listen to that record all the time. And it really encapsulated those feelings of like, so 1 minute life was okay and the next minute it just wasn't, and trying to piece together the breakup and the fallout from all that. Like the album is much less about the child than it is about like we are breaking up. And that the last album is just the last song in the album is just like a spoken word monologue of him essentially saying like, I'm packing all the stuff up in our house, and he's going through like a couple of things he has and like things he's putting in boxes and what it reminds him of and stuff like that. Like when you get to the end of that song, like if your eyes are dry, my friend, there's something wrong. Seek help immediately. Like I hear like the chords from it, and I'm like, dude, fuck. I heard like they did like I watched a promo video for it earlier on Instagram of the tour because unfortunately I can't go. For a good reason actually is because my dad's getting remarried. So woohoo for
Oh,
that.
lovely.
But I can't go to the tour because the dates overlap. Obviously I would much rather go to the wedding. But I heard the like the chords in the video, and part of me was like looking up like the week after. I was like, they're playing in Amsterdam. How much is it to go to Amsterdam? Like based off of like a couple of chords. Oh, dude, I love that record.
Wow. To hear I mean, I've never listened to La Dispute. That's a whole other thing that I need to get involved in. But I didn't realize that it had such a hold on you just for that. And that last song, is it like a poem, or is it more of just like a spoken word song? If
It's
there's a
more
difference.
like it's like a stream of consciousness almost. It's just like he is almost like it's almost like he's talking a lot. Like it's almost like he's talking aloud to someone who's not there anymore. You
Mm,
know, I suppose sometimes like I've like looked at photographs and stuff and been like, oh man, like I've seen like photographs of people that I've known who have died or whatever, and I've been like, oh dude, I wish you were here. Or like I would have thought about something, or I'd have been like, you definitely would have laughed at that, or something. Yeah, like you sometimes do just like talk aloud to someone who's not there
mm,
anymore. And it sucks. That's the worst sort of I think that's the worst thing about grief is wanting to have a conversation with someone who's not there. And a lot of that album's kind of about that. But Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. They're worth a listen. I think they kind of blend into that sort of like that pop punk of like, like the story so far and
Mm,
stuff like that. They kind of blend into like that sort of new era there, the other side of the coin of like, oh, if you like the story so far, you'll definitely like their sort of style of music. They're the same scene. They're just a wee bit deeper, a wee bit harder.
yeah. And then, would you say there are any other genres or albums outside of the general rock scene, post-hardcore, pop punk, any of that? Is there
Oh
anything that's
fuck yeah.
so far off that you would be able to mention as well?
Fuck yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We'll be here all day.
That's what I
Um,
did.
there's an artist I really love called Jason Molina. He's unfortunately died. Actually, but dead before the time I heard of him. But he toured as his moniker was songs like and a colon Ohio. He was from Ohio. They used to tour as songs Ohio, and he did I basically anything he did, I will say I loved. But there's a record in particular called the Magnolia Electric Company, which he then started a band called the same thing. And he claims like that was our first album, even though like nobody that was in the band apart from him played on that record, I believe. So it's like it really wasn't. It was the last Songs Ohio record. Doesn't matter. Anyway, it's recorded over like 2 days in the studio. He had that like sort of Bob Dylan approach of like, we're playing this now and that's it. And that record is fucking insane. It's like country music, but kind of like almost like alternative sort of rock country music, but not. There's like a bluegrass song in the middle of it, sung by somebody else, and it's just a deep record as well about a million things. There's a couple of songs about like heartache and stuff like that, but a lot of that record is just about like trying to find yourself, just wandering down the road. It's one of those records you kind of have to sit down and listen to. It's not for everybody because it is kind of like that sort of like cowboy music sort of, but it's not country in the way that you would think of it. It's not like real like Clint Eastwood cowboy music. Do you know what I mean? It's a great record. Like when I was like younger, I got into like bands like the Smiths as well. Like I loved the Smiths. Morrissey's a wanker, like obviously because he's the worst person in the world, Nazi cunt. Anyway, and but I love their music and I love Johnny Marr as a guitar player. I've went to see him a load of times, and every time I'm kind of like blown away by him. But whenever I got into the Smiths, I was like, dude, they are the best fucking band on the planet. And there's like nobody else that sounds like them or has ever
Mm,
sounded like them. And even when you listen to like Morrissey's solo albums, he can't even sing the way that he could when he was in the Smiths. Like immediately after it was gone, the magic was just with those like four individuals for the wee bit of time that they had. And I just think they almost have a perfect discography. In fact, if they had had a Johnny Marr's way, they would have had a perfect discography because they did a couple of covers and they weren't very good. And Joy Division as well. Like
yeah.
whenever I think about like Manchester, a lot of people go like, "Oh yeah, like the Stone Roses and Oasis," and I'm like, I fucking hate both of those bands. Sorry, but I do. I just do. I just don't get Oasis at all. And like not even Wonderwall. Like people are like, "What about like Live Forever? How can you hear that?" Or like, Don't Look Back in Anger. Like, how can you hear those songs a lot like them? And I'm like, you are the reason I don't like them. People who love Oasis are the reason I don't like Oasis. Fans ruin everything. But like Joy Division were like Peter Hook A is the biggest bass inspiration I ever had in my entire life. Watching him play the bass because he's the same. Like he just picked it up and could do things. And what he did with the bass is just like wow. Those Joy Division records, man, they blew my mind because they both sound like they could have been made today, yesterday. Like Love Will Tear Us
Mm,
Apart. Everybody knows that song, but like you could release Love Will Tear Us Apart today and nobody would have fucking known the difference. They're timeless. It's crazy in that respect. But if we're going to talk about like records that I love, I suppose in different genres, man, I could be here all day. I could be here all day with different people
just
in
get an
different bands.
episode two.
Oh, Jesus, dude, you'd be on the episode 42 and I'd still be like, oh, but wait, man, there's more. Big band. Now, the last one I suppose I'll sort of mention, like that are for me anyway, are called Midlake. I'm definitely missing other bands here, and I'll kick myself later on because I'm a fucking wanker, but whatever. But they're called Midlake, and they recently kind of got back together and did like a tour, I suppose, but they're like without their sort of lead singer and they've been doing music without him. It's still good music, but there's an album they did called The Trials of Van Occy Panther. And I first heard them on we like there's a friend who was a friend of our friend group who unfortunately died of a drug overdose when he was quite like in his early 20s. And on the day of his funeral, his best friend who I went to school with shared this song called Roscoe, and I was like, me and him always had similar music tastes. Like we used to lend each other CDs in school. I'd like give him my entire Opeth collection and begged him for it back because he was like, "You're never getting this back, man. I love this band." Um, but he posted it, and I was kind of like, the thing about the guy that died was like he was very like into his drugs and stuff like that, and into partying, and like not really into it, and like he was an addict. He just liked the party. He was like 22, he was carefree, did his own fucking thing. He lived the way he wanted to, and he was buried in a big, massive pink coffin. Right? He was the coolest guy on the fucking planet.
Nice.
God rest his soul. And but before before the funeral, I at the time that this happened, I was actually going out with his cousin, and living with her in a flat in Bangor. And before that happened, I was kind of well, before the funeral, I was sitting there like going, "Do I have a bong?" Because it wasn't going to be like a Christian funeral, it was going to be one of those like humanist funerals, and it was a great ceremony. It was, there was actually laughter at a funeral, one of those ones. And I was like, "Do I have a bong here? Do I do this? I shouldn't do this." And then like, oh, I showed up. I was probably the most sober person there, for fuck's sake, apart from his actual family. There was people like, there was a guy dressed as a carrot who was off as not like, it was just insanity. And so I was like, I'll have a bong. And then I clicked on that song anyway, is where the story's going. And when I heard it, it has like this mellotron opening of like dun 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 dun, dun. Like not I suppose I'm actually doing Creep and Death there, but it's not like that at all. But anyway, or sorry, Seek and Destroy. Anyway, when I heard that song, it instantly took me like somewhere else. And it was not the weed. Like it was just like it just took me to another planet for a wee minute. And I was like, shit, dude. And then I listened to the rest of the record like another day or something and was like, oh my God, man. That is like, I don't know any other record that sounds like it. It has like weird 80s influences, weird 70s influences, but it was released in like 2006, and like weird country influence. Like it's just so weird when you listen to it. It really takes you away. There's like that song and Head Home that's on it, and another song called We Gathered in Spring. I think Courtney, my partner, is sick to death of hearing We Gathered in Spring, but I stick it on all the time, and I'm like, this is the best song on the planet, man. Um, we went to see them in Dublin a couple of years ago, with my dad as well, who really likes them. And oh man, they played that song, and I just started to cry because I was like, "What God?" It's just surreal. So yeah, they were a big one. Midlake, man, Midlake, Jesus.
Wow. I've gotten so many new bands from just this chat alone to explore. But that's
See, I bet you go away and go, these are all shite. What's wrong with him?
well, I've got to go and clean my fucking kitchen, so I'm gonna put one of them
Dude.
on while I do that. But I mean, you can just tell from the way you speak and your general patter that music has such a grasp on your life, but in such a positive way. Like it's influenced you and impacted you in such a way that as you've said, quite literally become a new person. And I mean, I guess my final question to you would be like, what has music taught you?
Oh, dude.
What what
Like,
what are the things you've listened to specifically, whether it be the albums that you've mentioned already or other ones that you haven't had the chance to? What's its lasting impression on you?
oh, the millions of albums I haven't mentioned that I'll later go, oh, I should have talked about them instead.
we'll
Um,
we'll get a second episode. If this
fuck,
one is if this one goes well, we'll do a second one.
sure, cool. Actually, I'd be very happy to do that. But um, in terms of like what has music taught me, or what have I got out of it? Everything. It has like changed my life in a million different ways. From like the people that I know and speak to, because I find that like if someone isn't really into the same music as I am, I don't really speak to them too much because I feel like I'm so music orientated that if we don't have that in common, that like we probably won't really get on. It's not that I
Mm,
shut people out, but I just know that like if I meet someone, I'm not going to be best friends with them if their favorite artists are like Ed Sheeran and fucking Megan Thee Stallion or something. Do you know what I mean? It's just not going to happen. And there are people that like I'm friends with I've met through other friends who but whatever else that I get on with who I have, anyway, people who are really, really close to me, mostly it's about like music and like companionship and stuff like that. But the amount of people I've met through music and like the experiences and the places it's taken me, like when I think about like how I grew up, because I grew up in the middle of like the countryside, and it was like basically if I wanted to get into Bangor where I live now, I had to get like I've just dossed myself, but whatever. I had to get like two buses to get into it. You know, it was like I was out in the middle of fucking nowhere and never really had friends around. So I felt very lonely a lot of the time. And a lot of the time I was just like listening to music in my room. And I felt like, you know, you're never alone when you have music, you know, that sort of way. But being able to like discover it because it's like the gift that never stops giving. You can always go out and find new music if you go looking for it. You can always go digging and find your new favorite artist or new favorite song. I can tell you the amount of times I've woke up and been like, I'm gonna find a song today that I really, really, really like, and I'll dig for like an hour on like Spotify or something, and I will find something that I'm like, that was excellent. I loved that, and it was not just like, oh, I can listen to that. I'd be like, I love this. So let's keep it near and dear. But it's really like we talked about, it's really shaped how I am as a person and how I feel I should come across. And yeah, it's just really taught me such a manner of like just be good, just be positive, just try and like I'm not religious, clearly. And I'm kind of just my entire thing about like living is just like if you can just like get on with your life and do no harm to others and just be a good person, then like your life has had meaning. You know what I mean? You have done the right thing. If you can be a positive person, I mean, obviously there's people in your life that you'll meet and you'll negatively impact them. Like obviously in somebody's story, you are like the toxic person and you can apologize for that. And you're not always forgiven and whatever else, but you have to let that go and have to go like, okay, so shit went wrong there, but it doesn't mean that I'm the bad person. And I think a lot of what music has taught me is about like self-acceptance and like forgiving myself and being able to like rationalize and put my thoughts out there because a lot of like music is just like the recording of human history and human emotion. It is just like people going, I want to put how I feel on a page and get it out there, or other people are like, I want to make songs about bitches or have fun, like, you know, about having fun and drinking, whatever, like fine, whatever. But a lot of music's just people trying to put their emotions and their experiences out there into the planet. And I kind of feel like that's what I've got from it, the ability to be able to do that, because otherwise, like, I'd be a very shut off person. I think if I didn't have music, I don't think that I would be, oh God, I could never do something like this. Do you know what I mean? I don't think I could ever be as positive and as happy as I am now, you know?
Wow, that's such a genuine response. You're almost like the perfect person for this kind of podcast. You've mixed every single theme and every single notion that I could have possibly imagined and put it into one succinct like final comment. It
Well,
talks
thank
about
you.
positive mental health, the impact of music, pop punk, and just the influence that it can have on someone's life and others. I think it just always takes me back to what my dad always said, which was his four famous words of don't be a dick. And
Yeah,
if you can do that, then you're going to do pretty well.
wise man. And look,
Exactly.
do you know what? He's obviously raised a fine man in yourself, you know?
Oh, you're
No,
too kind.
not at all. Not
You're
at
far
all.
too kind. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on to do your
Thank
own
you for having me.
show. Anytime, absolutely anytime. Obviously, you had your last episode with the new normal that came out that
Mhm.
you were in. There will be one next week with another band that I won't spoil if people are listening to this one. But obviously, you're always welcome if you've got 100 million bands to talk about.
Oh, I'll always have stuff to talk about when it comes to music. If you're ever bored and want to have a general conversation about anything, anywhere, anytime, come and speak to me, honestly.
You
If
know
you
what?
want someone to, if you were talking about mental health, if you want someone to just to come and go, here, by the way, everything sucks, I'm your man.
Well, you know what? I might just have to take you up on that offer because that sounds
Yep,
grand.
anytime,
Perfect.
anytime.
Well, thank you very much, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, absolutely. Like, have a good one.
And you too, mate.
Cheers. Bye bye.
Cheers.